welcome to the new episode of In Love with the Process. I am your host, Mike Pecci. How are you? What's going on? What's new with you guys? It is July here, and I have been working hard, cranking out a bunch of new episodes. I'm making a push to get this show out more frequently and try to make every episode that much more entertaining than the last so that you guys stick around. I'm also trying to get the word out some more, guys. So please, if you like this show, post some stuff for me online. Post on your social media accounts. You know, take one of my graphics, your favorite episode graphic, throw it up there and tell people why you love the show. Direct them to my Instagram account. Direct them to In Love with the Process Pod on Instagram as well. I know people, every day someone new listens to the show and they say how much they love it, and they're just astounded that they didn't know it existed. So if you guys will tell folks, that will help me out immensely, and then I will continue making these things for you. So also, like I was saying before, follow us on Instagram. Go to In Love with the Process Pod. There you will find stuff that I post that inspires me or that really gets me excited. I will post like behind the scenes for movies, for scenes, for stuff that I've always wanted to know how they did, or I'll repost photography from amazing photographers. And I also will put up just inspiring pictures. That's the whole purpose of Instagram to me, is to become inspired. And hey, speaking of which, did you guys catch that really amazing Hershey s'more video that I posted last week? If not, I'm sure you've seen it online. Like I've seen it running on Facebook. I've seen it all over the place. It's this super sexy slow motion shot of 2 graham crackers twisting down on a toasted marshmallow and just smashing into like this melted chocolate bar. And it's amazing to watch. And no, it's not 3D. Even though you look at it and you go, that's gotta fucking be 3D. Like, how the hell did they spin the graham crackers? Like, how did they do it? It was all shot in camera using robots and some really crazy custom built tech. That's the cool thing about Instagram, is that you can find these really amazing things. And how often do you guys think about where this shit comes from? I know I find myself getting into that trance where I'm just scrolling up, and it's this endless amount of photographs that maybe I'll double tap on, maybe I'll give it a like, but it really doesn't register. And this is one of those pieces that I had to stop and go, who is this person? And I went further than just looking at their Instagram account. I actually dug into their website, dug into where he comes from and what he does. And that's what this show's all about. Joining me today is the mad scientist who pulls off everything in camera and does amazing things with food and product photography. Like, I'm not joking, guys. Literally jaw-dropping special effects that are done practically. So do yourself a favor. Right now, pause this episode and go to stevegiralt.com. I'll put the link underneath the episode. Go check it out right now. See, I told you, his shit's fucking really cool. And somehow I convinced him to be on the show today. So you're welcome. Let's dig in deep. Let's figure out how he makes his stuff. Let's figure out how he survives as a freelancer, because that's important. So you know the deal. Find your noise-canceling headphones. Find a comfortable place. Maybe you're riding on the bus to work. Maybe you're one of those socially awkward people that throws on noise-canceling headphones and doesn't notice other people on the sidewalk and just plows through everybody and crosses the street without looking. Okay, power to you as long as you're listening to the show. Okay, I can live with that. Throw them on. Get ready. New episode starts now. So, hey, Steve, thanks for joining me on the show.
Hey, Mike. My pleasure.
It's cool to meet you over the internet.
It's a small world out there, you know?
It is, man. It totally is. And I was just saying this in the intro of the show that I came across your work through Instagram. I saw that super sexy s'mores, that Hershey s'mores clip that you made, dude.
Thanks, man. That was a super fun one. And Instagram has really kind of become my such a driving force for me in where I get work and where I put effort in getting work. And it's actually amazing to be able to connect to people just like you around the world. That search by hashtag, and you find people that do the same thing or are interested in the same thing, and it kind of opens the door to some cool collaborations and stuff too.
Yeah, hell yeah, man. I absolutely love it. And I've completely embraced it for the past few years. And it always blows my mind the people that I'm able to reach out to and collaborate with. So, for all the negative effects of being on social media all the time, there is a pretty strong, solid one too. There's a positive in there.
There's positive time on the internet, not just negative time.
Unless you ask my girlfriend, who gives me shit for being on my phone all the time, then yeah, it's all negative time at that point.
I'll give you my wife's number. They could chat.
All right, so I guess it's really difficult to describe exactly what it is that you market yourself as. I mean, it's a photographer, cinematographer. I was reading that you are like a woodworker and a welder, and it seems like you wrap it all up into this visual engineer title. Can you explain to us what that is?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was having a hard time describing it to people myself. Hence the bringing the visual engineer title into it. And at first I thought people were like thinking I was a jerk, being like, oh, he can't just call himself a photographer or cinematographer. He's got to call himself a visual engineer. But at the end of the day, it's really people have actually embraced it, which is fun, seeing it on call sheets and stuff like that on jobs. And for me, it's just been great because it really describes what I do. It's bringing, it's like a new form of image making. I'm not just a photographer. I'm not just a cinematographer. I'm not just a rigger that's making rigs for shooting. I'm kind of wrapped it all together: director, photographer, cinematographer, rigger, special effects person, whatever, kind of all kind of combined together. And with that, new technologies and robots and steppers and all sorts of fun things that all kind of married together to kind of create images or visuals, as you call it, for mostly clients. And it's really fun. I mean, and it's really grown past just like, oh, that's what he does, and he does these things and he builds the things, but it's really grown past into actually how I tell stories, and that I found that I tend to somebody brings a concept to me, and I'll kind of take it apart and look at all the different pieces of it. Like you want it to be refreshing, and you want it to be delicious, and you want to tell this story and this about your product that's different. And I kind of take the whole kind of situation apart, and then I kind of put it back together in the way I tell the story about it. So it's kind of fun, being this new visual engineering thing, and how I'm kind of learning about what it is, honestly.
Well, I have nothing but the most respect for that, because my background, I started as a cinematographer myself and a photographer, and then slowly worked my way to be a director. And I do more directing these days than anything else. But I sent you some stuff. I don't know if you got a chance to look at it, but I've done some films where I lock myself in a basement with a mad scientist, and we sort of do the same. Not really the same type of thing that you're doing, but it's a little bit different. We do like science experiments and shoot stuff under microscopes, and actually create living creatures that I've actually put in my films, which is super cool. And the thing that's really fun about that whole process is it's like you get to hang out with mad scientists. And the first thing that I thought of when I looked at your stuff, and I went and I looked at all the behind the scenes stuff that you do, it's like you have your own little mad scientist workshop, and it's fucking cool.
I saw the stuff you sent, and mad props to you. I think it was really cool. I did one microscopic thing for Burger King recently, and a lot of respect for working at that scale on things with depth of field and just finding the thing that you're trying to look at.
Oh yeah, dude.
And there's definitely a big difference between 5 times and 10 times magnification and the problems that come with it. But no, yeah, and I think what you did with that is similar to like what I love doing, which is shooting things practically. I mean, I think people are kind of over CGI and fake, and I think the new generation really is kind of with people are starting to like shoot film again, and it's really interesting in that people are craving authenticity greatly in everything that they see and they do. And, all still goes back to like reality TV and, it kind of live
Yeah.
videos and just people want to see real. And I think, there's kind of this art of practical image making that's kind of making a comeback. Well, I hope it is, because that's what I'm trying to do. And I think it's great. I think, but I think we're kind of coming back to it in a way differently, in that we have a whole new realm of technologies available to us, like robots and AI and, all sorts of kind of really cool new tools that we could kind of integrate into that old practical story image making history that, film and Hollywood and photography have always had. So I think it's a really exciting time for practical image making, in that what we could actually do in camera is much greater than what used to be, possible.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I wonder if it's the same for you. I find that when I do practical stuff, I really enjoy finding the mistakes, which is really interesting, because with CG, mistakes, when you make a mistake in CG, it looks like shit. But when you make mistakes when you're shooting, you're panning the camera across the table and you see some amazing thing that you didn't think about, or like the actual physics of what you're filming present you with something that is so beautiful on its own and that you could never have conceived. Is it the same way for you?
Yeah, I think exactly. It's the happy accidents that I think are lost in CGI, and I think more than anything, I think so many CG artists, especially, I deal a lot with food, and mostly food and organics, so waters, liquids, and I think it's just it's all about those imperfections that make it real. And I think unless you did what I do, or, and are around food all day long and have shot it for years and years and years and years, being able to program that is really, really difficult, because you don't know the nuances that of the really finite details that make a difference between something feeling fake and real. And, once again, I think at the end of the day, it would actually take longer to do most stuff in CG than and shooting practically,
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. And there's something just so much more organic about. I mean, it's almost like directing actors. It's almost like being on set with actual people, and I've always loved that. And when creating special effects, especially if you don't really know completely what it is, it's just nice to have folks around you that are tangibly doing something and presenting you with stuff. It takes a lot of the stress off, I think, you as the creator, which is nice. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, totally. It's definitely fun.
Yeah, man. So let's get into a bit. So to catch everybody up, you started as you went to school for photography, correct? Is that how you started?
Yep, exactly. I picked up a camera in high school, working in the high school newspaper, then the yearbook, and then after college, I got a job as a portrait photographer at a high school like portrait studio, which was the worst job I've ever had in my life. But I did it for like 3 years while I was in college, kind of part time, because I didn't really, I knew photography in a very limited sense, and that, I grew up in Miami and I'm Cuban, and I thought, oh well, photographers do freaking kingses and weddings, and that's all you, and then the cool guys do model stuff. And I've come a long way from that, but no, I mean, it was a chance for me to pick up a camera and just shoot and not know, just like go out there blindly and just start pointing it at stuff and shooting, and shooting horrible portraits and whatever, proms and sports and a little bit of everything. And then it was really when I transferred to go to RIT in Rochester, New York, which is a really great photo program that I really, like, my eyes were really open to all the different things you could do in still life and, everything, you name it. But no, I wish I went to film school, and that I never actually have a formal, film background whatsoever. I took one continuing ed class at SVA in New York City, shooting with a Bolex 16 millimeter. It was fun. And that was probably, 10, 11 years ago. And then I kind of jumped on the Canon 5D Mark II bandwagon when that came out, shooting video through DSLR and learning all the mistakes. And, just like any good filmmaker, I started out with a music video. project. But actually, it's funny enough that I shot my first music video was for this girl who's now, somewhat famous, Kaisa, who had like this big hit like a couple summers ago. But I actually shot a music video for her early on. And I learned a lot, about all of it. And, I always tell people you either start with a music video or a documentary. That's how you learn filmmaking.
Yeah.
And then, having so many years of commercial photography experience, now, the nuances of light and all the things that relate to shoot production and all sorts of stuff really translate over really easily. And I think there's a lot of still photographers now in the midst of that kind of transition. And I think it's really exciting. I think it's really scary for some of the old, broadcast type video shooters, and that, they have all these new people entering their market. But
Yeah.
I think having a photo background is a really great way to get into film, in that you're concentrating literally at like one frame at a time before you go into the whole, multiple storytelling part of it, especially in tabletop stuff that I do.
There's definitely a bunch of crossover between the two of them. I find that I utilize a lot of my skills as a cinematographer when I go into photography, and photography is more still photography just seems to be more about the minutia. It's like it's the details in that specific moment. Like, how do you get the perfect the frame, the perfect moment, instead of what is the blocking, what is the energy that you're capturing with video. So there's a little bit of a differences, at least that I find, but especially with the stuff that you're doing with tabletop stuff, that is so incredibly fucking specific. Like you must. So how does a normal shoot work for you? Do you have like a client monitor and you have clients breathing down your neck, and then you have stylists, and then you have everybody sort of just watching everything that you do, or do you do it on your own? And like, how does your sets work?
No, we definitely always have clients around. But yeah, I mean, I've set up my studio space, which we're literally in the middle of expanding. We knocked down a wall to take on some additional space at the studio right now, so everything is a mess. But yeah, no, I have monitors all over the studio that people could watch what's going on from where they are. Because the other thing, people have to get other work done while they're on shoots. I'm finding now too, because everything's so damn busy.
Yeah.
But no, I like to bring the client into the process, and a lot of people are like, oh, I wait to present like the finished perfect thing. I like to kind of let them see the process of how I got there, and I'll go talk to them once I'm like, okay, I think this is good, and kind of have a little back and forth. Because I think it's easier for them actually a lot of times to approve a shot. They see the other stuff I've tried and why it didn't work, and where I ended up, or sometimes they're like, oh, where you were like a little while ago, or it was like that. We love that, and then also makes it easier to kind of move on too, because like, oh, okay, they know what they like now. Okay, great, we'll do that. And then yeah, I mean, we have stylists, either prop stylists, food stylists, model makers, whatever we need. We bring in job by job. The new studio expansion now, we actually have a little in-house prop house with a prop stylist, which will be great for a lot of the food stuff I do. Then we have a huge kitchen, and then kind of my little workshop where I have welder and soldering irons and multi-testers and oscilloscopes and all sorts of fun things to tweak things. But I honestly, I am finding though that less and less I'm the guy actually building the stuff. I actually have a great rigger, this guy Matt Huber, that's been working with me a lot. He's actually a photographer as well. He does a lot of cool work on his own, but he's also really great at rigging stuff and motion control stuff. So he's partnered with me on a lot of my bigger projects. Because I don't have the time. If I'm directing, I don't have the time to be, futzing, tinkering with this stuff and doing it. But I definitely plan out and give him kind of like a blueprint of like, this is what I want to do. And then it's just somebody to help execute and sometimes elevate it too by bringing their mind into the process. And I think, the more minds that are on the same page, the better. And it ends up being a better piece at the end of the day.
That's the trick, right? I mean, that's ultimately the trick of any really successful photographer, or even a really great director, is that you're supposed to bring other folks in, make sure that they're giving their best, make sure that they feel like they're collaborating 100%. And then at the end of the day, with me, they save my ass like more often than not, because especially when you're dealing with clients, I find that a lot of the time it's client management And so it's not a good look for me to be rigging or have, you know, my hands deep in a case pulling out cables when I should be over just sort of managing expectations and dealing with that kind of stuff too. So you're right about making sure that you're working with the right folks. And I really like the way that you you make sure that the client is, it's smart of you to make sure the client's the part of the process the whole time, so that that approval stuff is, that's a smart technique. I like it, dude.
Yeah, I mean, it goes both ways. There, you know, there'll be shoots where sometimes a producer will be like, "Yeah, can you just not put that up until it's ready because this particular client doesn't work well that way," and that's fine. You know, I think it's a matter of, I think having a good producer lets you know, that understands the client, that, you know, what the best way to work with them is. And you know, when we're doing still photos, you could even, I mean, we've had, you know, we have it set up with through, you know, Capture One, that
Yep.
people actually could view the shoot from wherever they are, in Nashville or in Pennsylvania or whatever, which has been really great for some shoots where, you know, the sometimes the person that makes the really final decisions can't make it on set, and it's easier if they're kind of watching from far away.
Nice, nice, nice. And so let's get into, I mean, one of the things that separates you from the pack really is, you know, your passion for electronics and like so explain to me your history. Did you start woodworking and welding, and then was that pre doing photography, or was that a hobby that you were doing? And then how did those guys combine? Like, how did you get in? How did you make all that work?
It all came together. Yeah, basically, it was a hobby. You know, I'm kind of a learning robot, and I always want to be learning new things and always, you know, researching new things, watching videos, you know, whatever. But I kind of went through a period where I found this awesome space in Brooklyn, that no longer exists now, unfortunately. But it's kind of a continuing ed kind of art place where they would have classes in woodworking and welding and all this kind of stuff. So basically, I just started taking, like, pretty much constantly. I was always taking some sort of a class, maybe two classes a week even. And so I basically, the first one was just, you know, straight woodworking. Then I did MIG welding. Then I did TIG welding. And then I did electronic circuits. And then I did a plastics and epoxies class and a patinas class. And I mean, I really, it was over years. I mean, that's the thing. It wasn't like, oh, okay, I'm just going to take a class and I'm done.
Yeah, right.
That's the thing. I've been basically building my skill set over, you know, decades now. As far as, you know, my passion for building and engineering, and that's like my family, like my dad's an engineer, my brother's a computer engineer, my grandfather was an engineer. He built like pacemaker parts, like back in the day. And, you know, my uncle's an engineer. So like
Wow.
in my household, when, you know, the dryer stopped working, they'd be like, oh, which person is best equipped to fix this particular problem? But it wasn't a repairman. It was, you know, sometimes they would call the grandfather in and he would bring his multi-tester and start taking things apart and machine a piece to replace it, and, you know, whatever it had to be. Which is kind of like a bit of a lost art now with, you know, I feel so many devices we buy now are just tossed in the dumpster and aren't fixed because you can't even get the pieces, or you can't even, you know, do anything with it.
For sure, for sure. And like most people don't understand exactly how those devices work. I mean, I come from it's kind of a similar background. Like when I started, I was when I was a younger kid, I used to work in a car shop, so I helped like refurbish cars, and I was building boats. And then I was an airplane mechanic apprentice for a while when I was in high school. So I did some of that stuff, and it always blows my mind how many folks just don't pay attention to how shit fucking works, you know? And so when you have a device, like recently, like a couple nights ago, actually, I was sitting around the house and I watched a doc on lithium batteries, and it never occurred to me how the fuck lithium batteries actually work. And when you see how a battery is constructed and how a lithium battery is made and the basic elements that are used to do it,
yeah,
it's fascinating, dude. It's
plates
really cool.
Little plates, and, you know, the electricity flows, and, you know, no, it's really interesting. And that's the thing. The more you know, the more you could apply those things to. So that's the thing. Every new thing I learn, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to apply that to something someday on some sort of a shoot idea. You know, I have like this dream of like getting a degree in like fluid dynamics or something, you know, like it's like so many of the things that we're working in with air and with liquids and stuff like that would probably really come in handy.
Yeah, man. Yeah, for sure.
Having the time is the problem. But, you know, it's really fun. And I still feel like I'm at the opening chapter of what I've been doing with visual engineering, and it's really only been 2 or 3 years now, 3 years I think, that I really kind of dove into that with when I did the burger drop video, that kind of was really like the proof of concept. So I'm really excited about where I'll go next, and the big push is in the next year is more robots.
Well, the robot stuff, now this is fascinating stuff. For some of the listeners that don't know this, they've integrated a lot of this robot technology into camera work now, so that you can actually recreate the same camera moves. And now you can recreate the same camera moves at like really fast speeds, which really helps you when you're doing slow motion stuff. And if you don't, I mean, the reason why you want to recreate the same camera move over and over again is it really helps for special effects, like plating work. So like if you are going to shoot a bunch of different passes and composite those things, everything is dead spot on, but then you're using it for a really interesting specific reason, right? So how did you get into doing the robot stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm more, I mean, forever and ever, yeah, people have been putting robots and cameras on robots. I'm more interested in them as model movers and what basically moving everything that isn't the camera. I mean, there is definitely a time, for the camera to be moving, but my future direction of where I want to go with it is really, I want one robot that'll move a light source. I want another robot that'll be doing my action, whether it's a pour or a splash or a drop or whatever it is that has to happen. And then I could have another robot for the camera to be moving around on if it makes sense for the shot. So the kind of the next chapter is that, especially in as you said, multiple passes is great for, you could do different lighting, like light for the left side of the product, light for the right side of the product, and then put it together, or one for the background and one for the foreground. But what I'm really, and the cool thing is, if the more you automate, basically, the more you could do that kind of stuff. Because if you still have any sort of a practical element in it, like a liquid or pour, you're kind of limited to what you could do. Hence the light moving on a robot to be able to get to the different spots as I need it to, or even two lights moving on a robot. What's the character from Spider-Man, Dr. Octavius,
Doc Ock.
Yeah, that's my ideal world, like 8 arms all doing different things, but, in perfect millimeter accuracy timing,
That sounds like that should be your new icon. You need to do a photo shoot and just have yourself as Doc Ock. That's perfect, man. So I know if you're listening to this podcast and you haven't looked, you have to go to his website and check this stuff out, because it may sound like Greek the way that we're talking about this, but it's really simplistic at its core, which is essentially that he's trying to get his camera to where the action's happening when it happens, and he's trying to control as much of these raw elements as possible, so that he can recreate these elements. Am I correct at that sort of thing, or is it even more than that, Steve?
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I mean, the reality is actually what I'm trying to do is actually very simple. I mean, the actions themselves are not necessarily complex. Where it gets complex is synchronizing multiple actions together. And that's where you have to remove the human element, or else you'll just never get it.
Exactly.
but in an interesting other point to that is, I found that the human element is also incredibly important when designing the action that you're doing, like a pour, or like like the way you whisk some whipped cream or something, and how you would pull that out of the bowl. Like we recently did the thing where we were like, oh yeah, you would lift it up and do this, and then like it just didn't feel right, and then we actually had a food stylist go in there and do it, and I'm like, that feels right. So then there's something to be said about learning from a person doing the action before you try to program that action. Same idea, I guess, if you're trying to do CG animation of something, like motion capture and all that kind of stuff is really important in that, trying to make these animations move without that data of that natural movement is really, really difficult.
Well, yeah, it's the imperfections that give character to things. It's like, we're so used to, as humans, to see things imperfectly. I find that with like a lot of HDR technology and a lot of like really high definition stuff, it's actually too fucking perfect. And I almost get pulled out of it. Like suspension of disbelief gets canceled for me, because You know, if you're driving around, I say this all the time. If you're driving around your car, my windshield's fucking filthy, and that's how I see most of the world. You know, it's the human element is completely needed to add that little bit of humanity. I feel like to whatever you're capturing, whatever you're putting on screen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, totally. And I think, you know, that authenticity. I think brands, like, some are a little quicker to pick it up, but I think, you know, a lot of brands are kind of picking up on the fact that, you know, actually sometimes, and especially in the work that I'm doing, like, the behind the scenes is almost the ad, or putting a super on the screen that says, hey, this is real, before they show you anything. Like, I don't know if you saw that, like, Gatorade Life Water Running Man thing. If you Google G Active Gatorade thing, that thing is pretty awesome, that PSYOP did. But no, I think, you know, the brands that realize that people want real stuff and put it and actually show it. And because I think so many people are used to the old model where you polish this thing so much that, like, before you release it, then you release it in the world, like, look how perfect it is. But people are like, you know, I guess it's cool. I've seen it 1,000 times, you know, like, but how did you do that? That's cool, you know? So, I mean, I think that's really exciting for me in that I'm doing cool stuff, and, you know, brands that are trying to tell those stories are coming out to me kind of directly, which is also really interesting compared to the traditional ad agency model. That's a whole other conversation.
Sorry to interrupt, guys. I just wanted to take a moment to plug our new sponsor, Audible.com. Now, why am I going with Audible now? Well, it's simple. I use it. I love it. I mean, it's the only way I can read. Actually, it's the only way I can listen to books these days without falling asleep. I don't know if you guys suffer from the same thing, but if I try to start reading a book at night, I usually fall asleep after about 10 pages, if I'm lucky. And then I forget everything that I read. So it's been really difficult for me to get through a book, to actually finish a book. So I started to look into books on tape, and the whole books on tape thing, which, I mean, my only reference to that was the stuff that I used to listen to as a kid, which was pretty cheesy, but the production on these things has come such a long way. I mean, it's almost like listening to a radio play of the book. They have, like, really good VO actors. They do music stuff. It's really cool, man. And I love listening to it as well when I'm on the airplane. Like, if I have to fly from the East Coast out to California, that's a pretty long flight, and I can bang out a bunch of chapters with that book. You know, throw on those noise-canceling headphones, and then you're deep into it. So I just got a book this week that I am super excited to start listening to. It's Stephen King's Dr. Sleep. Have you guys heard about this yet? This is the sequel to The Shining. Like, he wrote the sequel to The Shining. And the only way I even heard about it was that I had seen, I think I saw something online about the fact that they were going to do a movie based on it, which was really fucking crazy. And I don't know if you guys read the actual book for The Shining, but there's a lot of controversy with Stephen King, and the movie ended up being a lot different than the book was. So some characters survive. And apparently this book picks up with Danny at 8 years old. It's soon after the events that happened at the Overlook, and him and his mother have moved to Miami, which is cool. It's like a whole new setting, going from the snow to Miami. And apparently some of the ghosts from the Overlook have followed him there. So I can't wait to get started on this book, guys. And I'm going to talk about it on the show because it's cool. Why not? Because if I'm excited about it and I think it's cool, I'll tell you guys to read it. So, like I said, I'm pumped to have Audible as a sponsor because I love using it. And Audible is actually offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audible.com/inlovewiththeprocess and browse through their amazing selection of audio programs. All you got to do is download a title and start listening to it. It's that easy. So go to audible.com/inlovewiththeprocess. Now, here's the best part, guys. Our show gets loot for every person that signs up for a free trial, regardless of whether or not you decide to stick around for 30 days. So if you love the show and you want to support us, but you don't have the extra cash, I feel you. then do me a favor, go sign up for that 30-day trial and decide after a month if it's worth sticking with, and they're going to give you a book with it so you can actually start the whole process. And if you want, man, grab that Stephen King book so that we can talk about it together. We can, you guys are more than welcome to write me emails or questions. I guess it's kind of like having a little book club, which would be cool. I need a hobby, dudes, so hook me up. So like I said, go to audible.com/in love with the process. Now let's go back to being really nerdy with Steve. Let me go back to collaboration in general, because there's a lot of younger photographers that'll listen to the show and they're just looking for these little pieces, these little nuggets that are really hard to get when you're in class and you're not actually on the location. So how much is, when you're working with food, how much of it is your design as far as what the food does, and how much of it is what the food stylist puts together? Like, does the food stylist come in with an idea and you go, oh, that's fucking rad, I'll do that? Or do you hire a food stylist going, this is specifically what I want and this is how I need you to pull it off,
I'd say it really is a 50-50 collaboration. I think it's in my best interest to hire people and let them do what they do really well. If once again, working with really great people, I've had the pleasure to work with some really amazing food stylists and some not so amazing food stylists in my days. And, I'll have more words to say to the one when it's not quite right. No, I mean, and the same thing goes for props. The same thing goes with pretty much everything. Is if you find the right people, yes, you still direct them, and there will be times where you butt heads, and my view of something is different than what they did. And sometimes they'll be like, oh, okay, I guess if that's what you want, but cool. Sometimes, they'll stand up for their position and they'll say, hey, Steve, I know this is what you say you want, but honestly, I think it doesn't make sense for this or that or the other thing. And I definitely respect people that, speak their mind on, their opinions, and I embrace that more than just somebody that'll just say yes to whatever I say. In that, that it's adding a different viewpoint and it's no longer just my viewpoint. And often, as we kind of already covered, is that it's definitely usually a stronger, more approachable viewpoint at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's the best advice I feel like you can give anybody that's trying it. Because I think a common misconception is that if you're a director, if you're a photographer, you're supposed to have all the answers and you're supposed to be able to pull it all off by yourself. And sure, there are things that you can do, but for me, I hit a ceiling at that point when I was trying to do, years ago, when I was trying to do everything on my own. And it wasn't until I sort of opened up to other folks and I sort of allowed other creative people to come in that I then pushed past that point. So I think it's a really important thing to understand collaboration and to try to be a decent social creature, because what we do is a social business. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's all a conversation, whether it's through images with sound or without sound or moving or still. I mean, we're having conversations with people around the world, it's telling a story of some sort. And no, yeah, it's very social, and it should feel like a conversation.
So at this point so you've been doing this for a while now. So at this point with your career, what is your favorite part about it? Like, what is the thing that makes you the most happy about the entire process of shooting something? Like,
when it works. I mean, I'm literally almost on a daily basis now, like riding the line of like, this would go really well or this would go really bad. And it is a dangerous line. Obviously, if I'm just repeating the thing I've done before, it's easy. I know it works. And especially since so many things are now mechanical and computer based, it's like, you hit play again and your iPhone's going to play another song, whatever it is. And I think the challenge for me is always literally trying to approach every shoot, pushing the limits of every shot I can. And with that comes with this line of nervousness of like, well, it sounds cool. Will it work? Will they like it? But with that, comes the ups and downs. It means that, yeah, you're going to do some cool stuff. You might fail. And that's thing, you could always fall back on what works. But I think for me, the most exciting part of all of it is knowing that on a shoot, I kind of pushed a new place, whether it be by pushing a creative person a little further into like, oh, there's a little more conceptual or there's a little more abstract, or just literally pushing the physical limits of what has been done before. In that, oh, we moved, 3 lights at the same time in a camera and dropped 10 things and, whatever it is. And I think the one really good piece of advice for people, I would have to say, is KISS, keep it simple, stupid. Because it's really easy to get tied up in the technical stuff and needing to overcomplicate things. Because a lot of people are like, oh, yeah, why did you do that? You could have just dropped it. I'm like if it's the shoot that it makes sense for me to drop it, trust me, I'm the first person just to grab that thing and drop it,
Yeah.
And I think that's the challenge is in other people that do similar work to what I'm doing is a lot of them are way more technical based people than I am even. And they get really caught up in the just like, oh no, to make it perfect, I got to do this. And let me go 3D print something and then I'll do this and I put it in this other thing. And oh wait, in my basement, I got this other, like, no. Like we need to get this done now. So I'm the first person to say, hey, how can we do this simply? I don't need it to work for the next 10 years. I need it to work for like the next 30 seconds so that we can get the shot offset.
Well, yeah, for sure, man. And there's something to be said about that. There's a lot of folks that are so concerned about having things be so incredibly perfect and having things be constructed so perfectly that they almost have this anxiety about releasing things and actually finishing projects.
Right.
Which
that's a huge problem.
Yeah, man. And I think it's important that you sort of understand that it's okay to be learning in the court of public opinion. It's okay to be learning on stage. And you don't have to have everything 100% perfect. You're not going to be who cares if you're overly judged on this sort of thing? Because if you're making it aware that you're progressing and that every time that you come back out at it, it's even better. And if you come out initially with something that is so fucking perfect, how the fuck do you follow it up? So, I think it's really good advice for folks to understand that you really have to understand what it is that you're doing, why it is you're doing it, and how quickly you need to have it done.
Right. And it goes to even early parts of what of learning photography. It's like there is a time to be in automatic mode that works just fine on a camera. Some people get so tied up in like, oh, I need to control the f-stop and I got, what f-stop should I be at? And, and there's certain shots that makes a huge difference. But there's other times where it's just like, yeah, I think you should absolutely understand how to use the camera manual mode and why you're doing what you're doing. But I think, get past the technical thing and really stop thinking about that and concentrate on what the image is that you're trying to tell and how to make that image the best, not just on the technical part of how you're telling that image. And, I actually wrote this blog post a few years ago for Petapixel that, is a little bit of that, is like the different stages of being an artist and a technical artist in a way, in that like first you have to get over the technical part so you could really concentrate on what's most important and you see past the camera at what the camera is capturing. And I think it's an important part of the process. Like you have to put in your, as they say, 10,000 hours to learn and master something. So you have to get to the point where the camera stuff is automatic. Like when, I'm lighting something now, I'm not like really concentrating on like the specifics of it, but I'm like just about making sure the end product I'm getting is exactly what I want. And same as you said, every shoot you're learning, every shoot you're getting better. Every shoot you're a little smarter. And, I joke that I wish I gave clients of mine from like 10 years ago, like a free pass for a redo. Cause, I'm like, 10 years from now, what I'm doing for you is I could be able to do it so much better, but they're perfectly happy with it 10 years ago. So it's just funny because, I always look at my next shoot is usually my best shoot,
Well, yeah. And with clients too, I often tell clients, and I wish that it was this case, and it isn't these days, but I wish that there was some sort of loyalty where it's like, hey, you know what, stay in for the long haul, and go through this long process. Because if we learn together, if we develop things together, A, we're going to get quicker and faster with how we work, but B, the work's just going to get better and more refined. And I don't know if you're finding this lately, but I feel like with the oversaturation that is in the marketplace right now, the clients are kind of dominating and controlling the work that we get, and they're just sort of shopping. It seems like there's a lot more just go to Walmart, walk down the aisle, and pick out the guy that shoots hamburgers that fly through the air, and the guy that does red sneakers. You know, there's like a whole fucking aisle with people that shoot all sorts of different color sneakers, and they just sort of go through and go, yeah. But this guy does red sneakers, so I want this dude. Do you feel that way with the industry right now?
The industry is definitely in an interesting place right now, and a lot of it is to the fact that there used to be this incredible technical hurdle of just exposing a piece of film correctly, back, when I started photography, and that already took a bunch of people out of the running of who wanted to be photographers or cinematographers. But now the technology level, that hurdle is, I mean, as you said, somebody that's just out of high school or even like freaking 12-year-old, could do some amazing stuff, which, I look at as like a positive thing. Is like, okay, that simple part is out of the way. So now let's concentrate on making things even more incredible. And our abilities as artists will really stand out more once, you get past this technical, okay level type work that, and that's it. There's like e-commerce photography. I mean, there's a need for a ton of it. Every company has a website. They need to photograph their products, whether it be fashion or food or what, supermarkets or electronic stores or whatever it is. And yeah, you don't need, somebody of my level to shoot simple products like that on white, because once again, it's not that hard now. And the software and things in the world are going to make it even easier with Lightroom and with DaVinci and with everything. So I think, the true artists are actually going to emerge, in the next, 10, 20 years, in that, it's not just the guy that was able to get past the technological hurdles to make a good image, but there's somebody that actually has a real story to tell. And I think that there's something really cool about that. And I think, that once the ash kind of settles a little bit of this whole transition and things changing and social media and kind of everything that is kind of up in the air right now, I think there's going to be some really, really cool work that comes from that.
That's a good way to look at it, man. That's a very good and positive way to look at it. And
right. Yeah. You could also look at it really fucking negatively.
Well, I mean, I try not to look at it negatively myself. And I try to, I'm an open book. So like if anybody, that's part of the reason behind this podcast. Like if anybody comes over to me and asks me how I do something, I tell them how I do something. I never really covet techniques for something that I've already done, because I feel like I've already done it. And, my new techniques are going to be something different. My new story is going to be something different. And it really isn't what bothers me. And I feel like there is such a plethora of really talented and creative people out there right now, which is wonderful. And I don't mind losing a job to someone that is better fucking suited. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely. Yeah, no, I respect, people that are doing awesome work. Absolutely.
Fuck yeah, man. And if you lose that gig to somebody because, you're not going to get me on a fucking, polar cap shooting polar bears. That's not what I do, right. So I wouldn't even bid for that job. But I feel like there's like a devaluing of what's happening in our industry to a certain extent, where the prices are coming down so low that it's actually becoming really difficult, to afford specific things for a lot of folks, like, production insurance, and like be able to have a studio, be able to actually work with other folks, be able to actually employ like a food stylist and stuff like that. And like, it seems like you've been been very successful with this sort of stuff. Do you do most of your own marketing, or are you repped? Like, how do you end up getting most of your work? And you don't have to answer the question if you don't want to, but I ask.
Oh, no. Yeah. I'm happy to talk about it. Well, just like you, I'm very much an open book, and, I'm all about, collaboration and stuff. But as far as, I mean, I think getting work comes, like, it's actually insane. Like, so much work is just coming from Instagram now. It's really kind of crazy. Like, national TV spots and, stuff like that, which is kind of mind blowing to me still, that actually is like how that's happening.
Wow.
And same thing through LinkedIn even and stuff like that. And what I find is happening with the internet and, once again, all of us getting a little closer together in arm's reach of each other, no matter where we are, is that also people like VPs of marketing, like creative directors and all these people actually could find me directly. Like, they don't need to go through the rep. They don't need to go through an agent. They don't need to go, to my website or whatever. It's just like they see an image, boom, they're like, that's cool. Let me reach out to this guy right now. And it's funny. I've had these insane encounters in New York where people are like, hey, love your work. It's amazing. And I'm like, come over. Okay, great. Like, in like 2 hours later, like, we're having a conversation. It's kind of incredible that they're, before it was, me and maybe I was part of a production company, and they had a rep, and then the rep went to the agencies, and the agency people talked to the, producers talked to the creatives, and the creatives talked to the clients. And I mean, you had this huge, process to just let me talk to somebody else that's making decisions on the client side. And that's just being thrown out the door, and that, they could come to me directly. And I'm, in many ways, I'm basically creating my own production company now, and that, we, everything but post-production for video, we're handling from the creative concepting and actually, sorry, keep going in circles here a little bit, but I'm becoming a production company, but I feel production companies are becoming the new ad agency as well. So in a lot of ways, as a creative, I'm way more powerful than I ever was before, in that, brands are coming to me directly, like, Hershey's, or, what's the other one? Campbell's Soup, and, Pepsi. And like, these are huge brands that, aren't putting their work through the agencies like they were before. And right now I'm working on this, top secret project for a huge brand that would be a full global redesign, and there's no agency in sight. It's really interesting. And I think ad agencies are kind of struggling with what they bring to the game. Not that they don't, they absolutely do in certain instances. And there's certain jobs where I'm like, thank God there's an agency that's in charge of this.
For sure.
But I think that as far as how I get work, it's really like, boom, like, people are just reaching out directly. And I have people now, like, all over the world, because once again, it's a global world we live in, that are like, oh, we would love for you to do work in Kuwait and in Poland and Russia and Moscow and Spain. And, like these, and that's the funny thing is they're like, we have this studio in Barcelona, and we have a robot, or we have a studio in Norway, or, whatever. We have a Phantom and a robot. And like, the technical stuff is the easy stuff. Anybody could buy stuff. I mean, not anybody, but anybody with a friend with money could buy a bunch of stuff.
Right, of course.
But what they're all finding is that unless you have the people that really know how to use the tools to their maximum abilities, you're not, you're really, it's just sitting there collecting dust. And that's really interesting thing that I didn't realize until recently, is that, so much of what I do isn't just that I know the technical, it's I know how to tell stories with that technical stuff. And there's definitely a value to that. And it, at the same time, it's not something I could have done, 20 years ago. And like, I needed the last 20 years of experience to get to where I'm at now. And I think a lot of older, cinematographers and directors and photographers are kind of a little bitter at the world and in the market right now. And they're like, oh, I'm undervalued. They want to cut my budgets and, whatever. And it's like, well, are you doing enough to make yourself different? Are you doing enough to innovate? Are you getting comfortable, or are you, out there every day innovating? Me and a friend of ours have this saying that's just innovate or die. I mean, and that's more true now than ever, I feel, in our industry. Like, you could be the top guy that shot every ad or whatever, but next year you could have no work. It's really interesting how, if you're not constantly kind of changing and adapting to the future and the changing of the market and embracing it, not kind of pushing it off, how you could be irrelevant really quickly.
Oh yeah, man. And it's good advice. It's really good advice. And I struggle with that myself all the time, where the marketplace it can be such a brutal thing, because you go from being very busy and you're shooting the shit out of stuff, and then you cannot get comfortable. There isn't a moment where you can get comfortable, because the next thing you know, you won't get phone calls a couple months from now, and I feel like there's always someone hot coming right at your heels, right? There's always someone hot a swipe away on the phone. So you definitely have to be pushing. And it's an easy thing to forget sometimes, I think, because as a creator, you're trying to maintain your creativity. You're trying to push to innovate as much as you possibly can, and then you're also dealing with your real life shit too, which is an interesting fucking thing, man. Like, so I'm obsessed with my fucking work, so I'll get lost in what it is I do, and sometimes I have to come up for air, and sometimes you come up for air for different reasons. Like there may be some sort of health thing that you got to deal with, there may be some like a death in the family, there may be something that pulls you out of it. And you, as a freelancer, you can't get comfortable. I find.
Oh yeah, no, that's death right there.
Yeah, you can never get comfortable, even if you take a vacation and you take some time off. That it's such a hard thing to do because you know you're off the fucking grid. And I always find that for me, when I'm setting up jobs, I have to be planting seeds for shit that's going to happen like 5-6 months from now. And so most of the time, I'm communicating with folks, or I'm setting up the groundwork for something that may grow in the future. And if I'm taking like a month off, then I'm affected for like 2-3 months after that. Is it the same way for you?
Yeah, very similar. You know, I mean, I was just on what we called a workcation last week, because actually the other interesting thing is that my wife is a photo retoucher. She works out of my studio. She works for other people, not just for me. But cool. She handles all our still photo retouching, which is an amazing thing in so many ways. But we also kind of sit 5 feet away from each other 24 hours a day, which is definitely a test to the relationship. And as you say, like real life and getting buried in your work. And the biggest thing that definitely changed the way I worked was I had a kid 4 years ago, and like I want to try to go home at 5 p.m. if I can, or 6 o'clock if I can, and see my kid and my family and be a present father. And that's a challenge to somebody that otherwise I could work 24 hours a day. I mean, I could literally, actually I did one of those this week actually. So yeah, I mean, there's times where I could plug in and work like a forever and like realize like, holy shit, it's 6 a.m. already and I'm still not even tired, when you're really kind of in the zone on something. But I have to almost like schedule that time now. It'd be like, okay, whatever, this is happening, this is coming up, I'm going to do that. And then, the day after I'm going to spend some more time with the family and trying to make up for that time. And, and yeah, you have your crazy busy sessions where, I'll have a month where I shoot, 22 days in a month, which is crazy. And then I might have a month where I don't shoot at all. So, I think it's what I'm trying to figure out in life is also how do you balance exactly that and, take advantage of that quiet time to spend it with a little bit of time with friends and family. And a lot of that time actually hopping right back into innovating and creating the next thing for yourself that you can start sharing. And as you say, planting seeds for the jobs that will come, later. And same thing, I'll shoot stuff specifically for Instagram on days that I'm not shooting, just to keep cool stuff kind of out there. And it's the same thing. It's me learning and me testing something new and be like, oh, I haven't really played with, fire. Let me just do this like quick little fire test and I'll just throw it up on Instagram and it's cool. And, it's really interesting in that. And, part of the challenge to that is having the ability to have, a high-end camera around, like where I bought a Red last year, and then this year I bought a Phantom finally because I was renting it so much that it just made sense. So there's something nice about having a Phantom around to do a quick little fun shot. But and that's the thing. A lot of people get overwhelmed that they don't have the gear, and I think you just got to start somewhere. Whatever you could start with that you could shoot with. And you can make some sort of video with like a little Sony or a little, Canon or whatever it is, like get that. And cause I didn't buy a Phantom from the day one. It took a long time, to kind of build up to the fact that I have the clients that want it now, so I could rent it. And now it's worth buying. For sure.
Yeah. And honestly, with me, I've learned that, learning the technical stuff is important and figuring out how to use those cameras is important, but it's a lot simpler to do these days. I mean, you can literally just load up a YouTube video and sort of walk through how a lot of technology works. For me, I don't need a heavy duty piece of equipment to sort of figure out what my voice is. At the end of the day, I fall back on that little trick that I came up with nothing most of the time. I find that when I'm crunching with a client and I'm freaking out about, you know, the technology's not working and this is not happening, I always just go back to sort of my origins, where I'm like, shut off all the lights, let's grab a flashlight, let's do this. I could make this look really fucking cool, knowing that I was able to do that with nothing, you know, without a crew, without this set, without all this sort of stuff. Like at its core, I can still make great images because of that time that I spent doing it without all the toys. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that's another funny thing about is the lack of that thing that you think you need is actually what creates a reason to innovate. And I find that's happened like crazy in the work I'm doing. Because you know, my studio, I don't have, you know, 400 amps of 3-phase power. I have 100 amps that powers the whole studio and the air conditioners, the ovens, and everything. So, you know, when you're doing work with, you know, Phantom, for people who don't know, you need a whole lot of light. And, you know, traditionally people use, you know, 10K tungstens or 20,000 watt tungstens. And those use a whole lot of power. And I didn't have that option. And plus with food and things I do, it would melt everything. But so I've been building all my own lights out of LEDs because they're so much more energy efficient and they're really great and super bright. So almost in most of the shoots I'm doing now, it's all custom lights. I'm actually not using almost any like store-bought lights. Like I've literally gotten to the point where I built this power lighting controller that will power it all. You know, on this recent shoot, we were using 10,000 watts of LED power.
Oh my God, dude.
Equal
That's
to probably
amazing.
like 80,000 watts of tungsten. And the cool thing is it was basically like my power supply that I use is it basically runs on batteries, like lithium batteries, actually. It's really, really big, really big ones. So it's crazy. I mean, so literally I'm using, you know, maybe one household circuit worth of power to run that much light. And mostly because of the need. If I had the access to whatever I needed, I wouldn't have to have done that. But the end result is actually better in so many ways because I had to.
For sure, dude.
You know, nothing's a kick in the pants to anybody than, you know, needing to survive or needing to make more money to, you know, pay for bills. And, you know, a lot of times people go the wrong direction on that. They're like, oh, I'll just dumb down my dream and go work at Starbucks because I don't want to work that hard. But I think the ones that truly are successful are the ones that had a need to survive somehow and push themselves to make it work. You know, like, you know, basically, you know, a year ago from now, and where I really kind of, you know, really put a lot of money into these lightings and all the things I've been kind of doing, you know, we were at a point where, you know, I was not in a great financial place. Like I was putting all this money out, you know, transitioning clients because, you know, the new work hadn't really started rolling in yet. And, you know, we definitely had a oh shit moment of like, do I have to sell my apartment and move to Jersey or whatever? And now we're like 180 degrees from that. So I think, you know, I think if you know what the end result's going to be, you're not really pushing your limits enough. You know, you have to really truly take some steps blindly sometimes and hope that there's ground underneath them. If you know, once again, if you want to really push the top level of stuff, I mean, plenty of people are happy with a regular job and just kind of chilling through life. That is definitely not me.
Yeah, for sure.
But no, there's something to be said about having to believe that what you're doing is the right thing. Obviously not in a vacuum. But, you know, I have a good friend of mine. He's like, Steve, like, because I talked to him last year when things weren't great, and then now, and he's like, if I could have invested all my money in Steve Giralt stock, I would have put all my money in last year. Yeah, but you know, there's going to be hard times and easy times for anybody, you know.
Oh yeah, just get ready for it. I mean, it's you ride the wave, man. You're up at a peak point in a swell, and it'll always come back down, and then you try to just sort of hunker in and then ride it because you know eventually it'll come back up again. As long as you stay focused, as long as you keep pushing, then it'll find its way back out. So it's part of the purpose of this podcast, man, is that a lot of people don't talk about that stuff. I think a lot of people get caught up in tech shit. A lot of people get caught up in unboxing videos and what can I buy? And if I buy this fucking thing, then that means I'm a photographer and I'm a filmmaker. And it's like, no, making the decision to go freelance and live as a freelancer is a really difficult decision to make. And you really have to think hard about what it is that you're giving up and what it is that you're earning and what you're getting out of it. And it is one of the best decisions I ever made like 18 years ago when I decided to do it. It's one of the best decisions I ever did because I have experienced such incredible life adventures, a plethora of them, that when you start talking about them and you look back on it, you're like, Jesus Christ, like I'm such a lucky fucking dude to have been through that stuff. But you're also giving up so much, man. And there's no such thing as stability. There's no such thing as reliability. And you just sort of have to, I relate it to being a squirrel. You have to go out there, you get a bunch of nuts, you stack them away, and then you get ready. Because it's going to get slow, man. And, but I really appreciate, we're kicking it like the hour mark, and I should probably wrap it up, but I really appreciate talking to you about all this stuff, man. It's really cool to talk to another creative, especially someone that is being successful at this point and really finding a voice that people are fascinated with. I mean, the amount of fucking traffic that I've seen just on your Instagram posts for this stuff, you're definitely barking up a tree that people are fascinated by. And it's really cool to be able to chat with you, man. And, hopefully someday we'll be able to work on something together. But thanks for being on the show, dude. Is there anything that you want to plug? Is there anything that you want to say that you didn't say?
First of all, this has been awesome. It's been I think you brought up so many great questions, and I think you obviously have a great understanding of the good, the bad, the ugly, the pretty, and that's the reality of life. That life is not CGI. It is not this fake, perfect reality. It's not a Hollywood movie, and I think, that's something that, nobody really says in photo school or film school. And, they might like, oh, you'll be a starving artist, but you'll still be happy. And it's like, well, real life is complicated. But no, I mean, I think, the only thing I would say is, my Instagram is really the best place to see what I do, at Steve Giralt. My website will be, redone soon. But, and what I do love is, I've had a lot of people reach out to me on Instagram with questions. And once again, if they're, I'll usually always respond in some way or another. And I'm happy to respond to people. But, I'm always excited when it's somebody that actually has a really exciting question that something I might not have thought about. So no, I mean, I love the collaboration. And I think that, I like to collaborate with people and robots too. But but no, I think, I thank you for taking the time to do this. I think it's really important to kind of help the next generation. People helped me absolutely along the way and teaching me about the business, teaching me about, so many different things. And, people that work for me, I kind of take the same approach. It's like, I want you to get to know my clients and show you your work. And at the end of the day, we all get hired for completely different reasons. And I think there's nothing worse than the person that's so worried that, somebody is going to take their job away from them or whatever. And it's like, well, if you're doing a really good job, then you have nothing to worry about. And yeah, I mean, I think, to leave advice, one last piece of advice to people is just, just keep innovating, keep learning, and start today. Like, start right now. Like, don't think about it. Don't keep contemplating what you really want to do. If you really want to do something, start it at this moment, because I think all the world's best ideas just were thought about and never started. So that would be my closing advice.
Thanks for listening. I hope some of you photographers out there came away with something inspiring, maybe some new tips that will keep you going. But Steve is a super cool guy, and I'm glad that he spent the time on the show with us. And speaking of which, do me a favor and go follow us on Instagram at In Love with the Process Pod. That's In Love with the Process POD. I mean, if you go there, you'll be able to see a bunch of stuff that I'm going to post from Steve. You'll be able to see a bunch of stuff that I post that I find inspiring. I do some sort of behind-the-scenes stuff, and it's a great place to interact. And also, you can find a bunch of really great links in the bio on In Love with the Process. So go check that out. You can also subscribe to the show by clicking the link below. Make sure that you subscribe either on iTunes. I think you can do it on SoundCloud as well. I'm trying to be on as many of those podcast subscription services as possible. Putting these episodes out more frequently. I'm trying to get to the point where I'm putting them out on a day every week, but it's tough. So make sure you subscribe so you know exactly when it comes out. And stick around for the next. I've already recorded the next episode, and it's a really fucking cool one. I actually sit down with my harshest critic and my biggest supporter, my mother. That's right. If you guys have purchased my old Grindhouse DVDs, you will remember that she did a momentary on that. So she's no stranger to sitting down and giving me shit for the stuff I do. It's a really great episode, guys. So make sure that you subscribe below so you'll know when it comes out. And that's it. Thanks for listening.